Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Chala, Perek Aleph, starting today, Halacha Gimel. We're learning Daf Tes, and we left off on Daf Tes Amud Aleph by the Mishnah, 3 lines from the top of the Amid. We're dedicating today's class, Le'ilu Nishmas, Rab Mordechai ben Michal, Rab Michal ben Mordechai, Rabbi Shalman's father's yard site, which is today. So, Behemshech to the end of Mishnah Beis. As we spoke out when we finished learning the Mishnah. The Mishnah ends regarding the 5 grains, that they are both chayavim b'chala and ubemaisres. And as we spoke out, that statement doesn't fully work, because as an example, only the 5 grains are chayavim b'maisres. It's not true. Midrabanan, even vegetables are chayavim maisres. Same thing, v'chayavim b'chala, we already began the Masechta, the first halacha told us that the chamisha devarim have to have challah removed from it when you turn them into a dough. So we said that the ending of halacha beis, v'chayavim b'chala ubemaisres, is really an introduction to this Mishnah, to halacha gimel. What's this halacha gimel? This Mishnah is going to speak about various items in both directions, some of which are subject to challah even though they are exempt from maisres, and other items on the opposite direction that they are chayiv ben maisres even though they will be exempt from challah, as we will see. Now there's a couple of things that, even though we spoke about challah, we spoke about the oimer already, about chadash, I want to mention a little detail that will be negaya to the understanding of part of today's Mishnah, which is the following. The oimer consists of an isarin. Just to know, the word isarin means a tenth of an ephah. And yes, as we keep on learning, that the minimum share of flour from which you'll be chayiv to separate challah is when you have what we will call 5/4 of a kav, or 43.2 eggs. Let me speak about the quantity of eggs. 43.2 is a tenth of 432 eggs. The volume of 432 is the volume of an ephah. I'm mentioning this because when we needed to harvest barley the night of the 16th, that was a mitzvah to harvest. We already said it's such a big mitzvah that it's doicha the isur of harvesting on Shabbos. How much barley was harvested the eve of the 16th? An ephah, 432 eggs, amount of flour. And like all of the menachas in the Beis Hamikdash, for many of us, we just learned menachas not that long ago. Wow, the way it was sifted somewhere in the Azara. It was sifted 13 times. So it was the most refined flour. And from this Gavaldik is sifted flour, we removed a tenth of an ephah, which is an asarin, which is 5/4, which is 43.2 eggs. That is what became the carbon oimer. But there's a lot of extra. You began with, you have another 9/10. So just to know, like in any other extra on purpose, this is a purposeful extra, that the moiser of the oimer was redeemed, and then it was permitted to be used. So one of the things we'll mention, and I just wanted to give these quantities because we never spoke it out until now. I think the big, aside of the Mishnah, which is great, again, going in both directions, items that are chayiv and challah, patim and amaisres. Other items that are chayiv and maisres and patim and challah, there is a halacha that's taught by Rish Lakish. And we learned this halacha many times, especially those of us who started from the beginning. I know that Masechta Brachas was not about the direct Zerayim, even though it is in the Seder of Zerayim, but we are already in Masechta Schala. So one of the keys we learned is, number one, that all of the maisres lechatchila should be given in their prescribed order. I'm not even going to mention bikurim, because bikurim is given when it begins to grow. You put the little gemi, the rubber band, the grass, to mark which ones are the first ones. But when you harvest, from when tevel is chal, which is, let's say, from the meruach, and now you have to separate the trumas u'maisres, the seder is truma gedola first, then maiser rishon, only from what remains, then either maiser sheni and maiser ani, from the maiser rishon, maiser minha maiser. It has to go on that order. What were to happen if someone beshoigeg bemezid, instead of for separating truma gedola, they separated maiser rishon? Now let me explain something. The Meiserishin itself, like the Truma itself, doesn't have to be tithed anymore. So the Truma Gedoyla had no Meiserishin removed from it when you do it Kiseder. It had no Meiser Sheni or Ani removed from it. Doesn't matter. When the coin gets the Truma Gedoyla, it's completely a Misukin. It's Truma, that's Misukin. Same thing with the Levi. The Levi got the Meiserishin prior to the owner removing Meiser Sheni. The Levi does not have to remove Meiser Sheni from his or her Meiserishin. But if the owner did not give Truma Gedoyla first, as one should have, first, they separated Meiserishin, which also means that the Levi got 2% more than he would have gotten. Why am I saying that? Because even though Midoiraisa, Truma Gedoyla has no shear, but the average amount, or the amount that an average meaning not someone very generous, not someone very stingy, the Bainan is 2%, correct? So if I have 100 apples, I'm going to give 2 apples to a kohen. How many apples do I have left? Only 98. The Meiserishin will not be 10 apples, will be 9.8 apples, because I gave Truma Gedoyla first. Now, if I don't give Truma Gedoyla first, how much will I give to the Levi? I'm going to give 10% from 100. How much will he get? He's going to get 2% more than he would have gotten. And the rule is that if someone gave Meiserishin prior to Truma Gedoyla, the Levi, not only does the Levi have to separate Trumas Meiser, which is what he always has to do, prior to separating Trumas Meiser, he already got 2% more than he should have gotten. Levi has to separate Truma Gedoyla, and then he separates Trumas Meiser. This is step number 1. Comes along Reish Lakish, and no one argues with him, but we attribute this to Reish Lakish. It's almost as if he says, that the Levi has to not only give Trumas Meiser, but since he got his Meiserishin and no Truma Gedoyla was removed from it, so he has to be mesaken by first removing Truma Gedoyla. That's only if the owner gave the Meiserishin prior to the Truma Gedoyla when there was already a Meruach, which means that the product is defined halachically as tevel. There is a biblical obligation to have it tithed, and the Torah wants you to tithe it on the right order. You went out of order, and because of that, the Levi, you got more than you should have. You got to give that to the Kohen. What's going to happen when in the case where the owner separated the Meiserishin before Truma Gedoyla, bishibalin, higdimu bishibalin. Bishibalin means when the grain is still in the ears. It doesn't only have to mean in that stage. Really, it means prior to the Meruach, prior to the point where now you have to tithe it. The example that's given is it's still in stalks. You didn't even do the threshing. You didn't even remove the grain from the stalk. It's still in the shibalim, and you gave Meiser Rishon. So the Shlakish says that since the owner made a separate, first of all, it's valid. You were not chayiv, but it's valid. But since he did it prior to the chiyuv of separating, here the Shlakish says the Levi does not have to give to the Kohen Truma Gedoyla. The Levi always will have to separate from what he received 10%, which is called either Meiser, Minha Meiser, or called Trumas Meiser. It's the same thing. But the din that the Levi also has to give Truma Gedoyla, Resh Lakish says, if Higdimu Bishibalin, all he has to do is to give the Meiser, Minha Meiser. That's something that's halacha that comes up. I remember learning this throughout. Every now and then, we learned it whenever. We learned it plenty of times already in the Yerushalmi. What we're going to have today is something mamish gavaldik. The Gemara is going to give us 2 limitations to the din of Rish Lakish. I'll speak it out when we learn the Gemara. It means even Rish Lakish won't give that leniency always. It's shayach that higdimu bishibalin, and still the Levi will have to do not only Meiser Mena Meiser, but I'll have to give Truma Gedoyla, and then I'll have to give Meiser Mena Meiser in 2 limitations. There are 2 cases that I don't remember learning either of them, so it's Geshmak, Machlal, Yerushalmi. I always feel like we're constantly learning new things. Nothing wrong with reviewing, but you have to have a special neshama to have the chayas by Chazara. But when you learn something new, I don't say it's gavaldik. Okay, Chaver Daf Tes, let's hit it right inside. So behemshech to the last words of Halacha Beis, where the Mishnah concluded, V'chayavin b'chala uba maisris, the 5 grains. What are the 5 grains? Aviv, you're welcome back. So the 5 grains is chitim so'oirim. I'm going through the seder of the Mishnah. Chitim so'oirim kusmin, sheboy l'shul shifain. Wheat, barley, kusmin is spelt. It's my siman. The samach, and then shaboy l'shul is 2 words, oats, and then there's nothing left other than rye. You know, I don't have how rye is shifain, but if you go through the other 4, that's the my say it works for me. If it doesn't work for you, you make your own mnemonic. Okay, those are the only 5 grains from which you have to remove challah. And we know now there's so many other grains. You have rice flour, you have millet flour, you have potato starch. Look at Pesach for us. I mean, we don't eat kitnias, meaning we Ashkenazim. Today, you can make mamish tamoy kitam lechem, whatever you want. And it's not even kitnias. Forget about it. I'm not talking about rice, that for us it's kitnias. I'm talking about all of these flours don't have to have challah removed from it, not even midrabanan, not even not lachatchila. It's fine. And also, you have to remove the mices. So says the Mishnah. Now we're going to go in both directions. I'm going to now, says Rabbeinu HaKadosh, list the following items that take will be chayiv and challah, and yet it's going to be exempt from mices. Now you think about it. Well, how can that even be? It could be. So the Mishnah is going to give us 4 items. These are not items as if, what is it? You're talking about millet? No, items meaning halachic categories. Same grains, but they are leket. Remember leket? Leket is that when I am harvesting my field, if 1 or 2 shibalim, heirs, fall out of the hand of the one who is harvesting it, with many pratim that we learn together. It's not stam. You have to know exactly at what moment. 1 or 2, you have to leave for the poor. Same thing is with shikha. Shikha can be 2 ways. The most known way is you already made bundles. You already made the bundles. Now you're in the phase of going through the rows to gather the bundles. If you forgot 1 or 2, not 3, 1 or 2 bundles, once you went beyond it, you have to know how to define going beyond it. You learned all those pratim. Then what you forgot has to be left for the poor. Peya is easy. Peya is that you shouldn't even harvest your whole field. You have to leave 1 edge. It doesn't have to be an edge. It can be in the middle. Midoiraisa, there's no shiur. Midorabanan, it should be a 60th. But whatever. So these items are items that are to be left for the poor, which, by the way, including a poor Levi. In other words, this is an item that all people have access to. Not all rich man cannot take leket shikrupeya. But it's not something in which the Levi or the Kohen is unique, which would be, normally they don't have a chelik v'nachla. So everyone has, and they don't have. So Hashem says they're going to get. Leket shikrupeya, everyone has. Everyone has the same. Everyone. If you need to be an ani, all of the aniyim, the kohen who's an ani, the Levi that's an ani, they have the same right as in Israel of getting like a shikhopeya or stam hefker. Hefker is bein laniyim, bein lashirim, and I want to make it clear that hefker means you acquired it. You acquired it, and you made it into a dough. Now it belongs to you. Make it clear. Now the ani acquired it. He made it into dough. The rule is that the ani will never have to give maisris from leket shikhope. I know we learned this already. We're going to learn again at the source in the Gemara. Same thing with hefker. Even though these items are biblically obligated to have challah removed from it, there's no such a het that, I got it from hefker, I'm pater min challah. No, you're not. If it's from the 5 grains, you got to separate challah. Next case in the Mishnah will be u'maiser rishon shenitla trumasoi. Trumase refers to Trumas Meiser. Okay. In Yerushalmi, we have Hefker from the beginning with the vase. Now, I want to say something. What do you mean, Turim and a Meiseris? What Meiseris is Meiser Sheni exempt from Aviv? Meiser Sheni. In other words, prior to giving Meiser Rishon, you gave already Truma Gedoyla. Meiser Rishon has to have Trumas Meiser removed from it. But what's amazing is that from those 9.8 apples that I spoke out, from that, no Meiser Sheni or Ani will be removed. But you have to remove you have to give Chal. Meiser Sheni vehegdesh nivdu. Meiser Sheni that was redeemed, that was the Homosechtas Meiser Sheni, because you were outside Yerushalayim, or Hegdish that was redeemed. I want to make it clear, Hegdish must mean that when the Meiruach was made, it was still Hegdish. That's very important. Well, whatever, whether the Gemara will speak about this, we learned this in the prior chapters. So the din is that if I acquired flour from the Beis Hamikdash. They sold it for whatever reason. I don't have to separate from it any of the maasros because it belonged to the Hegdish during the moment that Tevel kicked in by the Meruach, but it's Chayiv and Chala. Now, what's difficult to understand is the Meiser Sheni. What does it mean? Meiser Sheni is exempt from Meisers. Yeah, Shkoyach. The Meiser Sheni was in the pile when you removed the Meiser Rishon. It was in there when you removed the Truma Gedoyla. So it already had all of the Meisers removed from it. The Gemara will explain what this is referring to. Bottom line is that you don't have to give Meisers. And yes, you have to separate Chala. Obviously, we're speaking about if it's from the 5 grains. Umaisar Oimer is what we spoke on in our words of introduction. Since you harvested an entire ephah, only a tenth, only a isarin of the ephah actually was designated as the carbon oimer. You had very high quality barley flour. The Beis Hamikdash had no use for it. The emes, there is one other carbon that comes from oimer, which is the minchasoita, but she can bring that. In other words, there was no carbon seaboard that the gizbar, or the one representing the Holy Temple, needed to have storage of. This is very much unlike wheat. If the Beis Hamikdash had extra flour of wheat, hold on to it, because there were so many communal karbanos that have to have flour included in its offering, but not the barley. So they would sell it. So someone bought, he was poide, he redeemed it. He doesn't have a heter by saying, I belong to the Beis Hamikdash. Wait, if I buy it and I make a bread, I know you say challah for Shabbat, you make bread, you're chayiv and challah. And now the final item is subject to a machlokes. If a person, for whatever reason, harvested grain from any of the 5 types, prior to its reaching a third of its maturity, the way you define a third of its maturity, the best way is that farmers know how much flour you can squeeze out of every stalk or every patch. You harvest it so early, so prematurely, that you can't even get a third of that amount of flour. It means it didn't even reach a third of its full size. That tfuah, we just learned in the last year. Like, what year does the tfuah belong to? What is the determinant? So the date is Echad B'Tishrei. But what needs to happen by Echad B'Tishrei? It has to reach a third. What happens if someone harvested tfuah shelo hivi shlish? So the Chachamim hold that it's amazing. Maisres, you don't have to give. You know why? It's not even called oichel. Because it's not mature. But challah you have to give. So holds the Tanakam. On this, Rabbi Lazar argues, Tfuah shelo yiviyah shlish, not only is it exempt from maisres, that's l'kula alma, p'turim and a maisres, he holds it's even p'turim and a challah, and this machlokes will be explained in the Gemara why each one says what they say.
Isn't it ochel for a behema, Rabbi?
Since it's a human food, whoever asked that question, Kevin is making a good point, just for the record, that something that is lechatchila grown for animals is included in the obligation of maisres. But something that tfuah is made for oichel adam, and it's not a shlish. Even if it would be designated, I don't know how it goes for animals, if the shlish, but for adam, prior to the shlish, it's a very, very green banana. I don't know tfuah because we don't buy tfuah, we buy flour. It's not oichel, unedible, or something falls off your tree. The avocado that grows in my backyard, it's ke'erech shelo yiviyah shlish. The Rambam writes, "B'chlal fruits are dangerous." Okay, let's go weiter. Now we're going to go in the other direction. And Elu and the following items are in the opposite. They will be chayiv in maisres, even though they're going to be exempt from challah. And now we're going to go through all of the types of flours. That's what we already mentioned, from which you can make a proper piece of bread or a mezainis. But they're not chayiv and challah. So ha'oides, we're going to go that oides means rice, doichin is millet, hapirogim is poppy seeds, from which you can make mamish flour and bread, vashumshumim sesame seeds, and all other kitniyos. So that we already know. They are chayiv in maisres. By the way, they're chayiv in maisres midrabanan. So what? They're chayiv in maisres midrabanan. But they are exempt from challah. And now we're going to the shiurim. one of the ways that we articulate the minimum shear is 5 roiva hakavs. It's 4 roiva hakavs is a kav. So it's like a kav and a quarter, but that's the way it's expressed. Upachos mechameshas revoyim bitfur. I do want to quickly read, even though it's not negea right now, but let's get familiarized with it. It's amazing how Tzipoidi was such a ir ve'em Yisrael. Tzipoidi is not Tzfas, but Tzipoidi is in that region. That throughout our history, from when Hashem gave us the Torah until the times of Chazal, because of inflation, at certain times, the name of the solid or liquid measurements never changed. The name of it, a loig, a kav, but the size changed. And let's go to the Rash Shadilio. We have time. Rash Shadilio, it's on the right column. It's more than halfway down. It's probably like 11, 12 lines from the bottom of the page. It's the last Divrei HaMaschal of the right column. Chameshes Revoim. So he says Chameshes Revoy Akav, 5 quarter of a kav, which is what? Which is equivalent to. Let's just get familiar with these words. Chamesh loigin tzipoidim, 5 loig tzipoidim, chayav and bechala, which is 6 Yerushalmias. You see how they trick us? Until today, like if you can't charge more for a package of potato chips, but they want to charge you more, what do? They make the packages smaller. So the same price. And they're getting less. So 5 loig used to be 6 Yerushalmis, used to be 7 midbariyos. Actually, I'm going in the opposite direction. So the quantity for which you need it in the midbar is when we got to Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu. 7 loig was the amount. Then at some point later, when we were in the Holy Land, and the reference point was Yerushalmi, was 6 loig Yerushalmis. And then in the final phase of Chazal, is when there was already Roman persecution. Like we said, it's called Talmud Yerushalmi. Ironically, it didn't come from Yerushalayim. The Chachamim, many of them came from Yerushalayim. Their parents, their grandparents. But the Yidden who wanted to keep the mitzvahs, which was against the law of Rome, they ran to the north of the Holy Land, beginning with Tiberia. Any place Tiberia and up, that was called the north of Israel, and that is where the Talmud Yerushalmi was compiled. That is where most of the Amoraim in that era lived. Some of them lived in the south, but most of them lived in the north. Like, it doesn't say the Chachamim from the north. It says the Chachamim from the south. It was like the Chiddush. And the main city which we attribute this change of the sizes of the measurements was Tzipoides. So there was Midbariyos, Yerushalmiyos, and Tzipoides, and I want to leave it at that. It's always going to be the same. The same will be 43.2x. That's what the Rash Shadilio says. So even though the sizes of the measure cups changed, but God's chicken eggs never changed. Even though there's an Oidi Yehuda that suggests that maybe there was some sort of change, not only when it comes to a chicken egg, when it comes to a finger, when it comes to other shiurim, where we know, like today, a kazayas. That's like the irony. We, halachically, what is demanded to be equivalent to a kazayas to us looks like many, 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 many kazayas. So does it mean that the zayas was bigger? The Noida Yehuda, I don't know if he speaks about a zayas, but he speaks about human measurements. The reason why the Torah gives an amma, because they don't change. So I guess it's standard. But he has a whole argument that he thinks that we got smaller, we got bigger. I forgot what he writes. It's fascinating. Okay, back over here. Now, says the Mishnah, I'm gonna mention 5 other items that asuvganim, sponge bread. What's that sponge bread? Bread that looks like a sponge. What's the meaning of a sponge, Aviv? There are many air spaces in it. Any bakery here that doesn't sell bread by weight, what do? That's what they do, vadai. They fill it up with air. You get the same size and you get less, so they make more money on you. I know that in Brazil, my father's business was to make lace. So how did you make money? You sold it by the yard. The bigger the holes, the less yarn you use. Same idea, sponge bread. So I don't know where's the cutoff, but bread that's filled with air pockets. Or v'haduf shanim, honey bread. Honey bread means bread that was fried in honey. V'ho'is keritin, wafers, which is a bread that was made from a very thin batter. We're going to get the details. I know on halacha, the way you define thin batter is that you can pour it. Unlike a dough that that means if you turn the cup over, the whole glub might fall out, but it doesn't pour. And the final, v'chalas hamasres, pan loaf, which means flour that was scalded, that means it was burnt. They poured on it boiling hot water. Really, there's going to be a whole machlokes in the Gemara, whether it means that was the last step that was done to it. That will be chalas hamasres, or maybe even if after the flour was scalded in burning hot water, it was then baked. No, even if, I think that would be maybe a bagel. I don't know. Is a bagel baked after? Boiled first and then baked. So there's a machlokes in the Gemara about it. But so we'll leave it for the Gemara. But a flour that was scalded with hot water, in other words, you have sufganim, dufshanim, who is keritin, chalas hamasres, and the fifth item, chevra daftesam beis v'hameduma. We are familiar with meduma. Meduma means that if you had a quantity of flour of truma that fell into many more of its quantity of chulin, but you do not have the needed rabbinic ratio, which would be of 100 to 1 for it to become nullified. You don't have that. Even if it's 99 to 1. Imagine it's 1%. All of it is called meduma. All of it, meduma means it doesn't have the kedusha of truma, but only a kohen can eat it. Only a kohen is allowed to eat it. So the din will be, all of it is exempt from challah. No, it's all of it is treated like truma, which is a big chiddush. I'm talking about the meduma, and the Gemara is going to come back to these 5 items. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to begin with the first stanza of the Mishnah, which is Elo hadvarim aviv, that are exempt from maisres and they're chayiv and challah. That was the first part. Pturim in maisres v'chayav in b'challah. And we want to know why. Where do we get that from? Right? What was the first one that the Mishnah mentioned? Haleket v'shikcha v'peya v'hefker. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Hoshaya asked to Kahana, just for the record, there is Rav Kahana, which was a Talmud of Rav. And then you have a colleague of Rav, who was already a Talmud of the Tanoim, like Rav was a Talmud from the era, from a Tana, he is called Kahana. The higher up you go, the less title you give. That's a good klal in life. When you see a person that has many titles, that's an indication of the lowliness of that person. The greater the person, the less the title. Right? You have Rabbi Z and you have Mendel. Who's greater? Mendel. Okay. Rabbi Shaya asked Kahana, Minayin, we're talking about the first items of the Mishnah, that shehein leket shikchompeya, and hefket. Shechayav mechalo, pturim in amaisres, amalei. Now, there's different ways of reading it, and we're going to go with the Pnei Moshe, that loy teimarli. Don't give me the answer that other people give. I reject the answer that people give. What's the answer that people give? So, Chevron Parsha Shalach, the pasuk reads, we should know the Reishis Arisoy Seicham Chala Torimu Truma Kama Ketrumas Goyren, and then the pasuk concludes Kain Torimu Oisa. So some argue that the last words of this pasuk Kain Torimu Oisa is extra. Right? It's very clear that from the beginning of your dough, that means when you make a dough, before you even put it in the oven, Chala Torimu Truma. And that has the status of Trumas Goyden, because Chala, my friends, doesn't go to the Levi. Chala is mamish Truma. If a non-kohen eats it, it's chayv misa b'dei shamayim. So that's ketrumas Goyden. But the words kain torimu also, so some argue, no, those words are extra. So from the words that it already says torimu, so why does it say v'chein torimu? So some argued, that's to tell you these extra words, that only if it has an owner, you're chayiv. Somehow, they learned it from those words. However, they learned it from the extra words. Extra words, it goes to that. Rabbi Hoshaya did not like that. That's the way they put it, for whatever reason. Because I understand, okay, it's extra words. How do you see, just because something is extra, you're excluding lekat shikha pe hefker, where do you see that from? So Rabbi Hoshaya told Kahana, In other words, he already knew what other people say. He didn't like it. So he told him that loy teibarli, don't give me that answer. I don't want that answer. Okay, say that. So Kahana, the big Kahana, gave him another answer. So Chazar va'amar, whoever has an art scroll, that's not the way. Whoever the art scroll didn't go with the Pnei Moshe. Geschmack to me. I like the Pnei Moshe. I'm saying what the Pnei Moshe says. So Chazar va'amar. So to this he responded. I know the word Chazar is a bissel shver according to the Pnei Moshe, but that's the way it is. I'll tell you how. This law may be learned ma'arba esrei from 14. What's 14? They spoke in riddles, these people. So we know that it took us 14 years to settle the land, even though the emes is that the full settlement of the Holy Land was fully conquered by David HaMelech. Prior to that, not only that, David HaMelech himself, he conquered Syria before he finished conquering the Eretz Shivas Ha'amim, which is why it's called the Kibush Yachad, according to some Rishonim. But but the bulk of the land was conquered by Yeshua, and 7 years of conquering, and then another 7 years of settling. And there is a unique law or an exemption of laws during those 14 years, as Kahana explains, which is Ma Arbe Esrei, just like all of the dough that was made during those 14 years are chayiv and chala, even though none of it was chayiv and maisres. The obligation of maisres, which has to do with which year of Shemitah are you in, when did we start counting the years of Shemitah? On year 15. So Vadai, the first 14 years, whatever it is that a person harvested and grew, was completely exempt from maisres. Yet it's chayiv and chala. In other words, you see, you have a precedent where something is exempt from maisres and it's chayiv and chala. So af elu chayav and bechala pturim min maisres. Now, why? I got it. There's a precedent that for 14 years, whatever grew is exempt from maisres, chayiv and chala. But why are we making that link to leket shikha peyon hefker? Evidently, during those 14 years, now what I'm saying now, I'm not certain with, but I get the concept. Even if during those 14 years, if you were from the lucky people, don't forget it wasn't in one go. The Chalukah wasn't in one go. They conquered 7 years, and then they began to divide. It took 7 years to divide it, which means that year number one, only some people had land, other people didn't have land. So there was a lot of hefker. In other words, prior to a Chalukah, everything belongs to the collective, which means everyone can take from anywhere. The kibbutz, it's like hefker-like. What I'm saying, what I'm not clear is that I don't think that once the chalukah was made for your family, I don't believe that your backyard was hefker. But doesn't matter. Since all of the land was not settled, there was always hefker dika property because it wasn't yet given to any specific family or in any specific tribe. So there is a concept of prior to the chalukah belongs to everyone. That's the concept of hefker, which includes leket shikhopeya. So that's answer number one. Mar gives answer number two. Answer number two is the way the Pnei Moshe will learn, because whoever came up with those words, came torimo oisas extra, people liked the rejection of Rabbi Shaya. He didn't want that. They wanted new sources. So Gemara gives another source. Rabbi Yechanan b'shem Rabbi Yanai. I'll tell you, I'm giving you a source that's so stark. So they are already acknowledging that many of the drashas Chazal, really, how does a drasha Chazal work? It works with Ruach HaKodesh, because when you read their source, how did they know it from the source? They didn't know it from those words. They know it because they had a Messiah, they had some sort of Ruach HaKodesh. And to us, it looks like they found an excuse. You see that word? That's what that word means. There is a certain truth to what I'm saying. But still, there are three drashas that the source that the Chazal gave from Scripture is so strong that once they said it, you know this is taka what it means. So I'm going to give you a source that's one of the three mikrois that are mamish gavaldik limud, which is that and this, guys, we have, take a quick look. Whenever we have, let's look in the Torah Oira Shalom. We're quoting a pasuk from Parshas Re'eh, in which it says, Ubaha Levi. And what's the yichus of the Levi? Why did God give to the Levi Ma'aser Rishon? Ki ein lo chelik v'nach le'imach. And the Haged, V'hayosim, V'almona that are poor. Asher b'shorecha, V'achlu v'soveyu, L'man yivarecha Hashem Elokecha b'chol masiyotcha, Asher tase. So says back in the Gemara, Uba halevi ke'ein lechelik v'nach le'imach. And he's coming what? What is he coming for? He's coming to receive maasros. That's to teach you when does the Levi get maasros, and from what does he get maasros? From a product that the Yidden have, the Levi doesn't have. So to compensate, why doesn't the Levi have? Because the Nachla was not given to the Levi. Even though we just learned recently, he got for the 48 cities were given to the Levium, and some understand that the Itaka owned it, but it's still not considered the Nachla. So since from items that the Levi can argue, 1 second, where's mine? So Taka there, at Chayv Litanloi. But something that Lechatchila belongs to everyone equally. What belongs to everyone equally? Hefker really belongs to everyone equally. And even Leket Shikchon Peya that can only be taken by the Aniyim, but if one is an Ani, it doesn't make a difference. A Yisrael Ani, a Levi Ani, a Kohen Ani, equal access. It's something that everyone has access to. Yotze Hefker, Shiyotcha v'Yodi Shavin. And he Leket, and he Shikcha, and he Peya, and he Hefker. Paturim and Amaisres, even though the source is from Maiserishin, but we extrapolate not only Maiserishin to all the other Maisres as well, meaning Truma Gedoyla, Maiserishin, Maiser Sheni, etc. Okay. And now for the final topic of today. So the Mishnah says another item from which Pturim min HaMaisres v'chayovin b'chala. So the Mishnah says Maiserishin shenitra trumase. This is important because when the Levi gets his Maiserishin, you can't say Paturim and Amaisres because you have to separate 10% from the Maiserishin, meaning you, the Levi. Prior to which it's called Tevel to Maiserim and Hamaisim. But after he separated Maiserishin, you don't have to separate from it Maiser Sheni. It's a Chiddush because from that product, no Maiser Sheni was separated. That's the meaning of Pturim and Amaisres, but Chayav and Mechal. So the Gemara says, hold on. Umikiven shenitla trumasoi. Even though, like I said, you can argue that Maiser Sheni has to be removed from it. It's not enough. It's not enough. Why didn't the Mishnah say that Truma Gedoyla is exempt from Maisers and Chayv and Chala? By the way, Truma Gedoyla is not Chayv and Chala. Truma Gedoyla, the whole Truma is Chala. But still, whatever was separated and given to its recipient does not need to have Maisres separated from it. To the point that the Gemara is asking, once the Levi gave the Truma, which is 10% of what the Levi received as Trumas Maiser, it's considered Chulin. It is considered Chulin. To the point that the Gemara doesn't even understand why did Rabbi have to include this in items that are Pturim and Amaisres. It's not even shaykh to say that it's Pturim and Amaisres. It must mean that there could be a scenario where one would potentially think that there still is another obligation. There's a chiddush hidden in these words. And Rebbe's machadish, no, you don't have to separate that separation. And what are we referring to? So let's go back to what we said in the words of introduction, that if an owner of a field who brought his product to the place of Meruach, which means now you're obligated to separate Trumas and Maisres. If that person accidentally or bemazed first gave Maiser Rishon, the halacha would be that the Levi not only has to give from what the Levi received, as always, Trumas Maiser, prior to giving Trumas Maiser, the Levi has to first separate from it 2% of what he received, because he received 2% extra. Because Truma Gedoyla would have been 2%, and you give Maiser Rishon only 10% of what remained after the Truma Gedoyla was given. He's got more than he should have given. He has to give it to the Kohen. So there will be times that the Levi who gets Maiser Rishon not only will have to be Nitla Trumasoi, meaning Trumas Maiser, he'll have to also give Truma Gedoyla first. Truma Gedoyla, Trumas Maiser. However, that's a raya to the din of Reish Lakish. Tiftoid explained the Mishnah is hinting to the case Shehigdimai Bishi Balin that if the owner went out of the Seder. But when did they go out of the Seder? Not from when the product became Tevel. No, the product is not Tevel yet. It's not a finished product. One stage. It's not the only stage. It's really any stage before the smoothing of the pile, before the putting it into the baskets. We had many chapters speaking about what is the Gemar Malacha from any given item. And on that, we quote Reish Lakish that if the owner gave it out of the order prior to the chiyuv of Maisres, the Levi will still have to give Trumas Maiser. Always the Levi has to give Trumas Maiser. The Levi will not have to give Truma Gedolah. And that's what the Mishnah is hinting to. That Maiser Ishan, even though the Levi only gave Trumas Maiser, the Levi did not give Truma Gedolah. In certain cases, he won't have to give it. Chala always. The Amar Rababo, and that's all b'shem Reb Shimon ben Lakish, that Maiser Ishain, that was given before Truma Gedolah, but it was given at a stage that you didn't have to give anything yet. Shegnim b'shibalin, their halacha will be, you are pater mitruma Gedolah. Now, where did Reish Lakish get that from? So Amar Rabbi Yosi, I'll tell you where he got it from. And here we're quoting a pasuk from Parshas Koirach. And take a look in Torah Yerushalmi base. Mikoil matnoi seichem. This is God is speaking to the Levi. From what you got, Torimu eis kol trumas Hashem. Mikol chelboi es migdashoy mimenu. Notice, just like Mia Yisrael, when I separate whatever I'm separating, the truma, the meiser, ideally it should be from the best part of it. That's called mikol chelboi. Hashem is saying the same words to the Levi, that when you get your Maiser Ishan and you separate from it 10% to give it to the Kohen, so Hashem says, Mikol Chelboi, the 10% that you Levi are going to be given to the Kohen should be from its best part. And then Hashem says, Es Migdashoy Mimeni, because the Trumas Maiser has Kedusha. Maiser Ishan has no Kedusha. There's a machlokes Tanoim, but that's the way we paskin. That means that the Levi can give it to me. It's a financial obligation to give it to the Levi. There's no holiness in it. But the separation that should come from the choicest to be given to the Kohen is es migdash mimenu. So that's the pshat. Comes along Reish Lakish and he says, I'll tell you, that there's another remes here. That when the Levi has to separate from what he received, chelboi, the best part, he only has to separate one best part. Only Trumas Maiser. And not both Truma Gedolah and Trumas Maiser. Loi chelboi v'chelav chaveroi. Even though that's an exception. Guys, remember the rule. If I, after the Meruach, I'm a Yisrael, if I wrongfully gave to the Levi Maiser Rishon, prior to me separating the Truma Gedolah, the Levi has to make two separations. First Truma Gedolah, then Trumas Maiser. The Lashon Yochid Mikol Chelboi is being merames that if Higdimu B'Shibalin, he doesn't give two separations. Another source to the din of Reish Lakish. Amar Rabbi Yoina, another pasuk in Parshas Koirach. And you can look in the Torah Yerushalmi for the whole pasuk. V'harimoise mimenu Trumas Hashem Maiser min Maiser. In other words, Hashem is hinting only Maiser min Maiser. V'loi Truma u'Maiser min Maiser. Now, the Gemara is going to give us two Gevaldik limitations to the rule of Reish Lakish. Number one, B'Shemeirach va'achar kach hifrish trumas meiser sheboi. When is it true that the Levi who got it b'shibolim only has to give only trumas meiser? That's when the Levi got b'shibolim. What do you think he did? He processed it because he didn't get it yet processed. And now it reached the Meruach. Now he went ahead and he has to separate what he has to separate. So we have from this source, from that source, you only have to make one separation. But if the Levi first separated from the Shibolim, he decided, it's amazing. I'm not going to process it. I was given items unprocessed. Why am I going to schwitz for the Kohen? I'm going to give from what I got, I'm going to give to the Kohen. Avolem hifrish trumas meiser, which is what he thought he only has to do, trumas meiser. And then he went ahead and he made the meruach loy bedah. And I let me tell you the logic behind this. When is the chiyuv meisres? When is it chal? By the meruach. Makes no difference if you're the Yisrael, if you're the Levi. So when there is a chiyuv meisres, and we had from two psukim, two options, a source, that you Levi, you're chayiv, you're only chayiv one. We look at it as if that when you separate the Trumas Meiser has in it Truma Gedolah. That's the way we would look at it. Two birds killed with the same stone. It's a bad expression. It's a mitzvah. We want to do it. It only works because theoretically, you're chayiv. There's a chiyuv of truma gedola. There's a chiyuv of trumas meiser. The Torah is telling you that in this scenario, one covers the other when you're chayiv both. If the Levi himself, prior to processing his meiser edition for him, if the Levi himself took those ears and he separated trumas meiser, he says, why am I going to work for the kohen? If I got it unprocessed, let the kohen schwitz. And then he processed to eat it. When is the chiyuv chal for everyone? When you made the miruach. Once you made the miruach, he's not giving meiser, mina meiser. He already gave it. So when the chiyuv was chal, he never exempted the chiyuv. He'll be chayiv to give truma gedola. I don't remember learning this, and this is great. That we don't have the heter of Reish Lakish. That's exception number one. I know it's late. Daf Yud, Amadal, just because tomorrow is a new thing. And the other exception is, when are we lenient? If the Levi is taking 10% from it, from what he received, the Torah is saying you only have to give Trumas Meiser. Now we learned you don't have to separate from it. You know what I can do? By Truma, it has to be Lachatchila min Hamukov. By Meiser edition, not even min Hamukov. If I have two piles of untithed items, as long as they are from the same year, as long as they have more or less the same quality, I have an option of separating from one pile for another pile. If this Levi who got the Meiser edition out of the Seder B'Shibalim, and he processed it, but instead of removing from it Trumas Meiser, he had other Meiser edition, and he removed from the other Meiser edition for that and for this. Then you still have to remove the Truma Gedoyel. When does the action of removing Trumas Meiser exempt the Levi from the theoretical obligation also of Truma Gedoyla? That's only b'shehifresh mimenu olav. Avalim hifresh mimakam achar olav. It's the same logic. In other words, this is tevel. The Torah is machadish that when you do an act of removing, it's as if you did two removings, but you have to do an act of removing, even though you exempted it because you removed it mimakam acher, but this still will have to have Truma Gedoyla removed from it. These are two exceptions to the rule of Reish Lakish. I'm going to stop over here, and God willing, to be continued.